I am calling 19 CF 20 State versus Patterson. Mr. Patterson appears in person and with attorneys Richard Jones and Charles Glynn, the state by district attorney Brian Wright. This is the time scheduled for sentencing. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this is an emotional hearing for many reasons and for many people. But this is a court of law. You may hear or see things that are deeply painful or disturbing. However, if you wish to remain in the courtroom, you must maintain decorum. The court will not allow any outbursts, gestures, or behaviors which disrupt the proceedings in any way. I further remind everyone that it is the rule of this court that all remarks must be directed to the court while seated. No one will be allowed to speak to or at counsel, the defendant, the victim or victim's family, nor to the gallery. Mr. Jones, have you been able to review the pre-sentence investigation with your client or Mr. Glynn?
Sure. Yes, we have.
And does the defense have any corrections to any of the factual information?
We do not have any factual corrections, but we will take issue with it in some part during argument. I
understand conclusions, but the facts. All right. Mr. Wright, has the victim's rights law been complied with?
Yes, Your Honor.
And I have reviewed the written victim impact statements and those contained in the pre-sentence. Do you have any oral victim impact statements?
Yes, Your Honor. There are 6 family members who would like to speak, and Attorney Chris Gramstrup, who is the guardian ad litem for Jayme Kloss, would like to speak on her behalf.
Okay. Who do you wish to call first?
Sue Allard.
Ms. Allard, if you'll come and be seated right next to Mr. Wright, please make sure you speak into the microphone. And if you'd state your full name and spell your last name, please.
Sue Ann Allard, A-L-L-A-R-D.
All right. Go ahead, Ms. Allard.
To the defendant, on the morning of October 15th, 2018, I received the worst phone call one could get. The lives of my baby sister Denise and her husband Jim were brutally taken, and their only daughter Jayme, my beloved niece, was missing. I fell to the ground and screamed. I was hoping I was just waking up from a nightmare, but later to realize it was one I lived for 88 days. My sister and brother-in-law were such loving and giving and beautiful people, only working and living to raise their only beloved daughter. I spent these days and sleepless nights trying to figure out why and how you could so brutally take these lives and kidnap Jayme in such a horrific way. It was senseless to me. Denise and Jim were a daughter, a son, a sister, a brother, a niece, a nephew, an aunt, an uncle. Denise was a loving godmother to children that will miss her more than anything and more, but most of all, a loving mother and father Jayme has lost. Jayme lost everything. She must start over, but she has her loving family behind her. 2 people, Denise and Jim, we love with all our hearts, were taken from us. We had to go through the motions of planning their funeral without getting the chance to respectfully mourn their loss. Their baby girl was still out there somewhere, and we needed to do everything possible to bring her home to us. Denise and Jim would never rest in peace until that happened. She was their world. I needed this girl home. We needed this girl home. My life was ripped apart and shattered into pieces. So much loss. My sister and husband died trying to protect their family, each other, their daughter. The nightmare of what they went through the early hours of that morning remains in my head every day. I don't want myself, Jayme most of all, nor my family to fear another day. I don't want another family to go through the nightmare my family has endured. Judge, as I come before you, I ask that you sentence the defendant maximum sentences on each count in this case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Your Honor, is Lindsay Smith.
Ms. Smith, if you'll come and be seated right next to Mr. Wright. And if you state your full name and spell both your first and last name.
Lindsay Smith, first name Lindsey, last name Smith.
What would you like to tell me?
To the defendant in this case. October 14th was a typical family event with nothing but happiness. Less than 12 hours after, I was woken up with the worst possible news. 2 family members deceased and 1 family member missing. And all of that leads back to you, one extremely terrible person. We spent the next 88 days living in fear, pain, and not knowing what happened to our family. There were so many sleepless nights, always watching our backs, and never knowing what to expect next. On the 88th day, we were finally told that Jayme would be coming home. Having Jayme home was the best thing yet to come. We were so glad that Jayme was home, where she belonged with her family, but you took so much from Jayme. You took her parents, her home, her childhood, and all of her happiness. She had to rebuild her life and start completely over. You took so much from all of us. You took my aunt and uncle from me. I was so very close to my aunt, and now I won't have her at the most important days of my life because of you. One of the most painful things for me to think about is that the last moments of my aunt's life were the worst and scariest moments of her life. No one should leave this earth in such a horrible way. My aunt and uncle were good people and never deserved to endure the pain that you caused them. The pain and heartache you caused to so many people is truly indescribable. I hope you live the rest of your life dealing with the pain you've put my family through. You took so much from our family, but you won't take our happiness anymore. Judge, I ask you to sentence the defendant in this case to the max sentence on each count in this case so this man never has a chance to hurt someone else like he hurt my family. We ask for justice for Jim, Denise, and Jayme Kloss. Thank you.
Your Honor, next is Jennifer Smith.
Ms. Smith, if you'll be seated right next to Mr. Wright. And if you'd state your full name and spell both your first and last name.
Jennifer Jean Smith, Smith.
Go ahead.
To the defendant, you have taken so much away from myself and my family. The horrifying murder of my sister and brother-in-law. Knowing what my sister went through the last minutes of her life, trying to protect Jayme, this doesn't leave my mind. I have terrible nightmares. Jayme was my sister Denise's whole world. I can't imagine how scared she was. It hurts so bad. We now no longer get to make more memories with them. Only hold on to the ones we have. Close in our hearts. Jayme no longer has her parents, which were her whole world, and she was their whole world. She no longer has her home, her bedroom, her belongings. All that stuff is just bad memories to her. You have taken all that and more. It can't be replaced. She lives in fear, doesn't have a normal 13-year-old life. And that's all from what you did. It's so heartbreaking. We now live in fear every day. Watch our backs. Have home security systems. We don't feel safe. I will say, I won't let you destroy my family no more. We can be happy again, smile more, move forward with life, and that's why we can. We will know you will be behind bars for the rest of your life and pay for all the evil you have done. I want justice for Denise, Jim, and Jayme. Judge, I come in front of you today to ask that you sentence the defendant to the max sentence at each count in this case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly Engerhart.
Ms. Engerhart, if you'll be seated right next to Mr. Wright. And the first thing I'll ask you to do is state your full name and spell your last name.
Sure. My name is Kelly Engelhart, Engelhar.
Go ahead.
DT. I am Jim's little sister. I tried to cry as much as I could so I wouldn't do this. But as you can see from the beautiful people that spoke before me, this is devastating to us all. My brother, 56 years old, just a simple man, didn't have toys, didn't have nice trucks. He worked all of his life. He worked for 27 years at Genio, and that's not easy work. He did what he could for his family. He worked every single overtime shift he could, and I never once heard him complain about it. He knew that's what he had to do. Like they said, the night we got the call, I still don't believe it. I still think that I'm gonna wake up someday and this is gonna be a bad dream. But obviously today we're here, and none of us are gonna win today. None of us are gonna get our family members back. My mother isn't gonna get her Sunday phone call from her son to tell her how the Packers, talk about the Packers, talk about the things that they like to talk about. No parent should ever lose their child. And unfortunately, my mother did. And it's devastating. It's devastated us all. I remember the night after it happened, and we were at home, and we had to go to bed. I have never in my life been so scared. I was scared to death for my siblings. I was scared to death for my kids. I was scared to death for everybody because we didn't know. For 88 days, we had to listen to people speculate, people talk about your family, and we didn't know. We didn't know who was involved, if we were in danger. It was extremely exhausting. You never go to bed for 88 days knowing that your niece is there, out there somewhere. How do you go to bed at night knowing, is she hungry? Is she scared? And we had to do that for 88 days. And I think as a family, like they said, it goes in your brain and it never stops. You never not think about it. And it's devastating. My kids lost an aunt and uncle. My nieces and nephews lost. My brothers lost their best friend. And that's the hardest, to see your family members suffer. But we all suffered. But thank God, after those 88 days, we at least got answers. We were able to put the pieces together, and one person did that. That was my niece. She saved our family. She put the pieces together, and now we need to move on. And Judge, the family asked that you, like the lady said before, to please sentence him to life in prison on both sentences consecutively with no possibility of parole. We have to be able to go to sleep at night knowing that our niece is finally safe and that nobody else can be hurt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Kloss.
Mr. Kloss, if you come and sit next to Mr. Wright, if you tell us your full name, please.
First name Mike, last name Kloss, Mikecloss.
What would you like to tell me, Mr. Kloss?
A lot of it, judges. My sister said quite a bit of it. My brother, he was a dedicated, hard-working guy. Like she said, 27 years. He worked at that turkey store, and I can probably count on one hand the days he missed because he was sick. He tried to do the best. He tried to provide for his family. Like my sister said, every Sunday, he called my mom. He would talk about Jayme and Denise's weekly, what they had going on that week. He was we're a big sports family. He loved sports, but he especially loved the Packers. He'd call my brother Jeff every Sunday, and they talked football. Like a lot of us Packer fans, if they lost on Sunday, he wasn't the best guy to be around Monday. He was just, yeah, he took it to heart, but that's a good thing. So my mom, brother are going to have them phone calls. That's taken from us. October 15th, I remember it like yesterday. I think about it every day. I was getting ready for work. My wife came down screaming, "Your brother's dead, Denise is dead, and they can't find Jayme." I didn't know how do you comprehend anything like that. So I went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Walls was waiting. My sister told us what happened, and like I said, not used to none of that. Then I had the undaunting task of going to my mom's house and tell her that her son, daughter-in-law were murdered and that Jayme was missing. I've done a lot of hard things in my lifetime, but that was the hardest thing I had to do. And like Kelly said, the next 88 days, they were terrible. I mean, we lived in fear. My kids were scared. My niece and nephews were scared. My wife was scared. My mom was scared, and I just don't know how to describe it. It's a feeling that you don't want to ever have anybody else go through. And then as I learned about the events of that early morning, I'm at peace that my brother did not suffer. But I'm also as mad as hell that he didn't have a chance. Because if he would have had a chance, this would have been totally different. And like Sue, Jennifer said, Lindsay, I can't imagine what Denise was going through her mind in that bathroom. I don't know, and she didn't die in vain. She died protecting Jayme. I mean, that's all we could, that's great. And because of this monster, Jayme won't have her mom and dad at her dance recitals. Won't have her mom and dad at her prom, homecoming dance. My brother won't be able to walk down the aisle at a wedding day. Sorry. My parents, they raised us just to be good, hardworking people, treat people fair, honor, do the right thing. Jim and Dace were doing the right thing, and Jimmy didn't get treated fair that morning. So we just asked that you impose the maximum sentences. Do the right thing, and please do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Claus.
Mr. Kloss, if you'll be seated next to Mr. Wright. And if you'd start out stating your full name, please.
Jeff Kloss, Jeffrey D. Kloss, I'm sorry.
Mr. Kloss, what would you like to tell me?
Well, my brother Mike's been the spokesman for the family, and has done a great job, and all things he said are absolutely true. And I was listening to Lindsay, and I started thinking about, like Mike said, You know, Jim didn't have a chance, but he terrorized. He terrorized Denise. One thing about Jim. Just give me a minute. Jim was as tough as they came. If he could have got his hands on him, it would have been different. And we miss him and love him. And we think about him every day. And like Mike said, the phone calls, they're done. I want her often. He gets to talk to his family. We don't get to talk to him at all, ever again. And we have to live with that, and we will. And we'll be stronger. We're gonna move on. Judge, I know you're gonna do the right thing. One thing about Jim, he wanted to go to work. He loved like Mike said, he loved the Packers. He loved Wisconsin sports, and that's what he lived for. You know, I think that's a pretty good day. So I know you're gonna do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Chris Gramstrup.
Mr. Gramstrup? If you'll state your full name, then spell both your first and last name.
Chris Gramstrup, CHRIS, GRAMSTRUP.
Go ahead.
Judge, this is the statement of Jayme Kloss.
Okay.
Last October, Jake Patterson took a lot of things that I love away from me. It makes me the most sad that he took away my mom and my dad. I loved my mom and dad very much. And they loved me very much. They did all they could to make me happy and protect me. He took them away from me forever. I felt safe in my home, and I loved my room and all of my belongings. He took all of that too. I don't want to even see my home or my stuff because of the memory of that night. My parents and my home were the most important things in my life. He took them away from me in a way that will always leave me with a horrifying memory. I have to have an alarm in the house now just so I can sleep. I used to love to go out with my friends. I loved to go to school. I loved to do dance. He took all of those things away from me too. It's too hard for me to go out in public. I get scared and I get anxious. These are just ordinary things that anyone like me should be able to do, but I can't because he took them away from me. But there are some things that Jake Patterson can never take from me. He can't take my freedom. He thought that he could own me, but he was wrong. I was smarter. I watched his routine and I took back my freedom. I will always have my freedom and he will not. Jake Patterson can never take away my courage. He thought he could control me, but he couldn't. I feel like what he did is what a coward would do. I was brave and he was not. He can never take away my spirit. He thought that he could make me like him, but he was wrong. He can't ever change me or take away who I am. He can't stop me from being happy and moving forward with my life. I will go on to do great things in my life, and he will not. Jake Patterson will never have any power over me. I feel like I have some power over him because I get to tell the judge what I think should happen to him. He stole my parents from me. He stole almost everything I loved from me. For 88 days, he tried to steal me, and he didn't care who he hurt or who he killed to do that. He should stay locked up forever. Judge, those are the words of Jayme Kloss, and it's been my privilege to deliver them to you.
Thank you. Any
No
other
additional
statements?
statements, Your Honor.
Right. And I have reviewed the written statements provided to me today. I think you got a copy of those, Mr. Glenn?
We did, Your Honor.
Okay. Any other witnesses on behalf of the state?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Glenn, any witnesses on behalf of the defense?
No.
All right. The state's argument?
May it please the court. The state is asking you to follow the sentencing recommendation submitted by Agent Jennifer Sem in her pre-sentence investigation report. That sentencing recommendation, joined by the state, is as follows. The state is asking you to sentence the defendant, Jake Patterson, to life imprisonment on count 1, first-degree intentional homicide for intentionally causing the death of James Kloss on October 15, 2018, shortly before 1 o'clock a.m., and to find the defendant is not eligible for release to extended supervision for intentionally causing the death of James Kloss. The state is asking you to sentence the defendant to life imprisonment on count 2, first-degree intentional homicide for intentionally causing the death of Denise Kloss, also on October 15, 2018, shortly before 1 o'clock a.m. That you find the defendant is not eligible for release to extended supervision for intentionally causing the death of Denise Kloss, and that the sentence of life imprisonment on count 2 run consecutively to the state's requested sentence of life imprisonment on count 1. The state is asking you to sentence the defendant to the maximum sentence of 40 years imprisonment on count 3 for kidnapping Jayme Kloss on October 15, 2018, shortly before 1 o'clock a.m., after the defendant murdered both of her parents. That the bifurcated sentence on count 3 consists of a term of initial confinement in prison for 25 years, followed by a term of extended supervision for 15 years. And that the total length of the 40-year bifurcated sentence on count 3 run consecutively to the state's request for consecutive sentences of life imprisonment on counts 1 and 2. The state's sentencing argument that you find the defendant not eligible for release to extended supervision on counts 1 and 2 is based on the same factors the court will consider when sentencing the defendant: gravity of the offenses, character of the offender, and the need to protect the public. The state's argument, both as to sentencing and finding the defendant not eligible for release to extended supervision, encompasses the charge of armed burglary in count 4 of the information which was dismissed and read in. The gravity of the offenses is evident by the very essence of the charges to which Mr. Patterson pled guilty: 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, both Class A felonies, and kidnapping, a Class C felony. In every way imaginable, these crimes are aggravated in this case by the premeditated planning the defendant engaged in, his calculated and cold-blooded murder of 2 innocent parents, James Kloss and Denise Kloss, in the presence of their 13-year-old daughter, Jayme Kloss, his abduction of Jayme by force from her home, and his confinement of Jayme at his residence in Gordon for 88 days before she was able to escape. Your Honor, Exhibit 1 are family photos of James, Denise, and Jayme. This is the family that Mr. Patterson destroyed. James was 56 years old when he died at the hands of the defendant of a gunshot wound to the head and neck. Denise was 46 years old when she also died at the hands of the defendant of a gunshot wound to the head. The medical examiner ruled the manner of James's and Denise's death a double homicide. James and Denise loved Jayme, who was their only child, ahead of anything else. Jayme was everything to them. Jayme and her mother were especially close. Pictures of Jayme adorned the Kloss home. James and Denise both worked. Over the years, they were able to purchase their own home just outside of Barron. They put money aside for retirement, spent time at the lake in the summer with Jayme, attended family gatherings, were active members of their church, a quintessential Wisconsin small-town family. All of this was about to change. In early October 2018, the defendant got a job through a temp agency working at Saputo Cheese in Almena. As he was driving to work on the morning of his first day, he saw Jayme getting on the school bus that stopped in front of the Kloss home. When he saw Jayme, his thoughts immediately turned to how he could kidnap her. He had been thinking about kidnapping a girl for several months and was just waiting for the right opportunity. When he saw Jayme getting on the school bus, he began plotting that because of the location of the Kloss home on Highway 8, police wouldn't know where he had come from. Duluth, Eau Claire, the Twin Cities, and there was little or no traffic at night. It was a location where the defendant felt he would be able to get away with his scheme of kidnapping a girl, any girl. The defendant quit on his second day of work at Saputo Cheese. On the very night he quit, which was on a Friday, he made his first attempt to kidnap Jayme. The defendant drove past the Kloss home around 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., but when he got there, realized he went there too early. There were cars in the driveway, and he was concerned that someone there would see him. He was concerned that he would get caught. The defendant drove to the Kloss home a second time, 2 days later, on Sunday night with the intent to kidnap Jayme. This time he got to the Kloss home later, on Monday morning around 12:30 a.m. The defendant was thwarted in his second attempt to kidnap Jayme because the lights in the Kloss home were still on and he saw people moving around. Again, he was concerned that he would get caught. On Sunday night, October 14, 2018, the defendant made final preparations to kidnap Jayme. This would be his third trip to the Kloss home for the purpose of kidnapping her. He took a shower and shaved his head and beard to make it less likely he would leave any DNA behind. That night he wore jeans, steel-toe boots, a black fleece sweatshirt, a black ski mask, black hat, 2 pairs of gloves. He brought with him a knife, black Gorilla Tape, a flashlight, and his father's 12-gauge Mossberg shotgun that was later recovered from the defendant's residence in Gordon. A statutory aggravating factor under Section 973.017 sub 3 sub A of the Wisconsin statutes is the fact that Mr. Patterson concealed his identity. Earlier that night, the defendant loaded the shotgun with 6 3-inch slug shotgun shells. He purposely loaded the shotgun with slugs as opposed to buckshot, knowing it was almost guaranteed that by shooting someone in the head with a slug, they would be dead. He wore gloves and wiped down the shells with a handkerchief to avoid leaving fingerprints. He decided to use his father's Mossberg shotgun for 2 reasons. 1, because it was such a common gun and would be difficult to narrow down to him. And 2, it would be most effective in killing whoever was in the house. The defendant disengaged the interior dome light in his car and cut out the interior trunk safety release so the trunk could not be opened from the inside, what he described as the glow-in-the-dark kidnapping cord. As he had done on his 2 prior aborted attempts to kidnap Jayme, he replaced his rear license plate on his car before getting to Barron with a license plate he stole off another vehicle. Driving through Barron, the defendant readied himself to kill whoever was inside the house with Jayme that night. The defendant decided the best way he could get away with kidnapping Jayme was to go to the Kloss home at night, kill anyone inside, and not leave any witnesses. He arrived at the Kloss home on Monday morning, October 15, 2018, at approximately 12:45 a.m. or 12:50 a.m. He turned his car engine and headlights off and coasted into the driveway. His car came to a stop in the middle of the driveway. He grabbed the shotgun, got out of his car, and walked up the driveway. There were no lights on in the house, and it was pitch black dark outside. Exhibit 2, Your Honor, is a photo of the shotgun the defendant used to murder James and Denise. Mr. Patterson's DNA was on the shotgun. Exhibit 3 is a photo of the 3 unused slug shells out of the 6 shells he loaded into the magazine tube of the shotgun. The 3 spent shells that were found at the Kloss home match Exhibit 3. Ballistic tests determined the 3 spent shells were fired from the shotgun shown in Exhibit 2. And the defendant's DNA was found on all 3 of the spent shells that were found at the Kloss home. Inside the house, Jayme was in her bedroom when she heard her dog, Molly, start barking. Jayme got up and saw the unexplained car in the driveway. She woke her dad and mom up. Denise and Jayme went into the bathroom. Denise locked the bathroom door, pulled out a drawer from a bathroom cabinet to barricade the door shut, and she and Jayme then hid in the bathtub. James did what any good father would do. He put himself between the unknown danger that lurked outside and his wife and daughter. James, holding a flashlight or the light from his phone, peered through the window in the living room in an attempt to see who was outside. As the defendant was walking up the stairs to the front door, he saw someone in the living room window who was shining a flashlight or a light from a phone outside. That person was James. According to his statement to police, the defendant yelled loudly, "Don't move, get on the ground." James did not get on the ground and instead walked to the front door. By then, the defendant had opened the storm door and was standing. In his statement to police, the defendant said he then yelled, "Open the fucking door." James looked through the small wrought iron window pane in the middle of the interior door and asked the defendant to identify himself. With the barrel of the shotgun inches from the window pane and pointed directly at James, the defendant shot James in the head at point-blank range. The terror and fear that Denise and Jayme felt at that moment must have been excruciating. This was a shotgun. This wasn't a handgun. It wasn't a gun with a silencer, but a shotgun. A shotgun that country neighbors to the west, with a stand of trees between their home and the Kloss home, could hear even from inside their house. At close range, the sound of that shotgun blast would have jolted Denise and Jayme, and the sound would have been deafening. Add to that their sense that James was dead. The defendant tried kicking the door open but could not gain entry. He pumped another round into the chamber of the shotgun and shot at the lock. Only seconds later, Denise and Jayme would have been jolted a second time when they heard the deafening sound of the second shotgun blast, also heard by the neighbors to the west. He was then able to gain entry into the house by kicking in the door. Exhibit 4 is the photograph of the front door that Mr. Patterson kicked in after shooting at the lock. The defendant saw James grabbing his face as he stepped past him. Now inside the house, he immediately proceeded to the closest interior door to him, which was the bathroom door. He tried to open it, but it was locked. At this point, the terror and fear that Denise and Jayme felt can only be described as unimaginable. Seconds after hearing the first two shotgun blasts, sensing James was dead, and now hearing someone forcibly trying to open the bathroom door. He raced through the rest of the house, intending to kill anyone he found, anyone. Finding no one else inside, he returned to the locked bathroom door. Denise had taken her phone with her when she and Jayme hid in the bathroom. Somehow, in the midst of the terror and fear of knowing the person who shot James was now in the house, Denise was able to call 911. This is the 911 call that Barron County Dispatch received, the CD recording of this call having been marked as Exhibit 5.
Barron County 911, where is your emergency? Somebody I just want from. Hello? Somebody. Hello?
The defendant rammed the bathroom door over and over before he was able to break through the door Denise had barricaded shut. Exhibit 6 is a photo of the bathroom door that he broke through to get to Denise and Jayme. Denise and Jayme screamed in fear when the door gave way. Once inside the bathroom, he walked up to the closed shower curtain, shotgun in hand, and ripped the shower curtain down. When he did that, he saw Denise and Jayme huddled in a seated position in the corner of the tub, Denise clinging to Jayme, holding her in a bear hug. Denise told the defendant that she had already called 911 and that police were on the way. The defendant, who was still holding the shotgun in one hand, wrestled the phone out of Denise's hand with his other hand and threw it aside. According to his statement to police, he said in a calm voice, "Just be quiet, do what I say, and I won't hurt you." He took the duct tape that he brought with him out of his pocket and ordered Denise to cover her daughter's mouth the whole way around her head. Denise struggled to tape Jayme's mouth. The defendant's description is that she didn't do it very good. He put the shotgun down on the bathroom counter sink, took the duct tape away from Denise, and did it himself, taping Jayme's mouth, hands, and ankles. With Jayme now bound and only feet away from her mother, the defendant grabbed the shotgun off the counter, pointed it at Denise's head, and at point-blank range, shot her in the head. The proximity of Jayme to her mother and the sound of that third shotgun blast in the small, confined bathroom, even more deafening than the first two blasts, would have jolted Jayme to the bone. The defendant didn't even look at Denise when he killed her. The defendant grabbed Jayme by the arm and dragged her out of the house, almost slipping on James's blood when he stepped over him and dragging Jayme through her father's blood on the way out the door. When he got to his car, he dropped Jayme at the driver's side door, threw the shotgun in the passenger seat, and then popped open the trunk. In his statement to police, Mr. Patterson said he told Jayme to be quiet and not to move or he would kill her. He then dragged her to the back of the car and threw her into the trunk. He got in his 2000 red Ford Taurus, took off the mask so no one would see him wearing a mask as he was driving away, and drove eastbound on Highway 8 with Jayme locked in the trunk. As he was driving eastbound on Highway 8, he pulled over when he saw squad cars with lights and sirens activated racing westbound on Highway 8 to the Kloss home. When he got to his residence in Gordon, he removed Jayme from the trunk. For the next 88 days, he kept Jayme a prisoner in his house. Jayme went into survival mode. He kept her in constant fear by yelling at her and threatening her that things could get a lot worse for her and that something really bad would happen if she did not follow his rules. He would get mad at her for no reason at all. He physically hit her with a curtain rod. Exhibit 7, Your Honor, shows where the defendant confined Jayme for 88 days. This was her prison. To make sure she did not try to escape, the defendant put totes and bins filled with his clothes around the bed so she could not see out. He placed barbells and free weights from weightlifting equipment he had in the totes or around the totes to make it harder for Jayme to move them and as a way for him to see if she tried to get out from under the bed. When he had people over, he took the additional step of turning the radio on so Jayme could not hear his conversations with persons who came to the house. The defendant celebrated Thanksgiving eating out at a restaurant with his family, while Jayme was confined to her prison under the defendant's bed. The defendant celebrated Christmas at his grandparents' house, while Jayme was confined to her prison under the defendant's bed. No bathroom breaks, no movement, no sound out of her for up to 12 hours at a time. Those were the defendant's rules, rules she better follow or something really bad would happen to her. This horrific ordeal and the 88 days of trauma Jayme endured came to an end not because of anything the defendant did, but because of Jayme's courage and will to survive. On Thursday, January 10, 2019, at approximately 4:00 p.m., Jayme, knowing full well what the defendant said would happen to her if he ever caught her trying to escape, did the incredible. Jayme summons the strength and courage of the bravest among us and decided no matter what happened to her, she was going to try and get away. She shoved the totes and weights away from the bed, crawled out from under the bed, managed to locate a pair of the defendant's sneakers and put them on, but was so hurried to get out of there before he caught her that she put them on the wrong feet. Seconds turned into minutes as she shoved the totes and weights away from the bed. With each step she took to escape, the terror of not knowing where he was got more and more intense. Was he in the house? Was he standing just outside the door? Would he drive up? Would he find her as she was walking down the driveway? Would he find her when she was walking down the road? Disheveled and wearing only pajamas, no coat, no gloves, and wearing sneakers far too big for her and on the wrong feet, she saw a lady, Jean Nutter, walking her dog and yelled for help. "I'm Jayme. I don't know where I am. He killed my parents. Please help. I want to go home." Homes in this subdivision are spread out, and many of the homes and cabins are not occupied in the winter. Jayme was not out of danger when she was walking outside down the driveway and along the road. At the end of the driveway was a rural and remote road. Jayme had no idea where she was. The danger did not end for Jayme as she and Gene Nutter were walking down the road to the home of Peter and Kristen Kacinskas because of the distance, the sheer distance that they had to walk to the Kacinskas home. In the chilling words of Mr. Patterson, if he would have just returned home a half hour sooner, he could have prevented her from running away. The defendant arrived at his house that afternoon and, in his words, quote, knew he was fucked, unquote, when Jayme wasn't under the bed. He saw tracks in the snow and a police car at a house down the road from his residence. The defendant got back in his car to hunt for Jayme. Even after he saw police at the other house, he still considered whether he should just go out there and maybe see if he could do something. The thought he gave to doing something, even after seeing the police, leaves little doubt about the grave danger that Jayme, Gene Nutter, and Peter and Kristen Kacinskas and their family were in if Mr. Patterson had found Jayme before police arrived. The defendant had already shown what he would do if anyone got in the way of what he wanted: kill anyone with Jayme and leave no witnesses behind. Mr. Patterson is a cold-blooded killer who traumatized a 13-year-old girl for 88 days. He brutally murdered James and Denise because they stood in the way of his getting away with kidnapping the girl he saw getting on a school bus, a girl whose name he didn't even know when he kidnapped her. The defendant insists he is a good person, and this makes him extremely dangerous. During Jayme's period of captivity, he told her that she had it really good at his residence, told her how good he was treating her, how she could have it a lot worse. On his job application, which he completed the day Jayme escaped, he wrote that he is an honest and hardworking guy. When he was interviewed, he told investigators, quote, "I'm like a nice guy most of the time," end of quote. Mr. Patterson's lack of insight into why he is not a good person makes him a continuing danger. He has no empathy or remorse for killing James and Denise. Lou Raguse, a reporter with KARE 11 News, sent Mr. Patterson 10 questions, which he answered, the defendant answered. And I've included Mr. Raguse's questions and Mr. Patterson's answers as Exhibit 8. Nowhere in the defendant's answers to Mr. Raguse's questions will you find him expressing any remorse for murdering James and Denise. What an indignity to their lives for him to say the reason he did this is complicated. There is nothing complicated about why he murdered James and Denise. He murdered them to avoid getting caught. Their lives were inconsequential to him, just an obstacle in his way to kidnapping Jayme. What you will find in his letter to Mr. Raguse is his continued attempt to control Jayme by communicating directly with her about how sorry he is about everything. He's not sorry for kidnapping Jayme and murdering her parents. He's sorry that he got caught. Detective Nelson observed that the only time Mr. Patterson became emotional when he confessed to murdering James and Denise and kidnapping Jayme was when he asked if he would spend the rest of his life in prison. How sorry would Mr. Patterson have been for everything on January 10 had he gotten to his house a little earlier and found Jayme inside putting on his shoes, or walking down the driveway of the house that he was residing in Gordon, or walking along the road with Gene Nutter? How sorry would he have been then? His only remorse is that he is no longer able to exercise complete and total control over the 13-year-old girl he kidnapped and thought he had gotten away with. Mr. Patterson murdered 2 human beings in cold blood and kidnapped a 13-year-old girl, and yet he is the one who is upset. This was his answer to one of Mr. Ragusa's questions. Quote, "Little mad about the cops saying I planned this out. This was mostly on impulse." End of quote. The defendant will stop at nothing to get what he wants if he is ever released from prison. The need to protect the public starts with Jayme. If Mr. Patterson is ever released from prison, he will find Jayme, and when he does, her life will be in jeopardy. After 2 weeks, the defendant thought he had gotten away with murdering James and Denise and kidnapping Jayme. After 88 days, he was so confident he had gotten away with it that he applied for a job. He got caught because Jayme didn't follow his rules. He made it very clear that something really bad would happen to her if she didn't follow his rules. Not only did she not follow his rules, but in his self-obsessed way of looking at why he got caught, she betrayed him by escaping. It was because she escaped that he got caught. For Jayme's safety, the defendant can never be given an opportunity to bring about what he meant when he told Jayme that something really bad would happen to her if she didn't follow his rules. As the defendant was driving away from the Kloss home on October 15, 2018, he positioned the shotgun with the 3 slugs that were shown in Exhibit 3 still in the magazine tube on the passenger side of the car. When he was interviewed, the defendant indicated he thought about shooting the cops if he was stopped. For the first 2 weeks after he kidnapped Jayme, he kept the shotgun loaded and ready in the house, just in case the police arrived. The defendant was prepared to kill again. If Mr. Patterson is ever released from prison, anyone standing between himself and Jayme will be in peril. The defendant planned out in detail how he was going to kidnap a girl, any girl, and get away with it. As carefully as he planned Jayme's kidnapping, he will eliminate any possibility of his target escaping if there is a next time. His mindset was to kidnap a girl, any girl. As time passes, maybe he will lose interest in Jayme, but time won't fix his mindset of taking multiple girls and killing multiple families before he kidnapped Jayme. For the safety of the community, the defendant can never be given an opportunity to kidnap another girl and to murder her or anyone with her. The only mitigating factor in this case is the defendant's decision to enter a plea. And respectfully, that does not move the scale one bit after what he did to Jayme and her family and the families of James and Denise. The impact of what he did will never go away for Jayme and for the families of James and Denise, some of whom you have heard from today and are present in the courtroom, others who are here but are watching from a different courtroom, and still others who aren't here because the trauma of what happened is still just too much. Agent Sem described the impact that this has had on not only Jayme, but the families of James and Denise. And you've heard about that impact today from them. Some of the impact that they understand and over time have been able to move away from was the fact that they weren't able to grieve for the loss of James and Denise because at the time of their funerals, they were worried about whether or not Jayme was dead or alive. All family members had their homes searched. They voluntarily submitted DNA. Some were even questioned on the day of James's and Denise's funeral. Those are things that over time they will move past. But the things that are not going to be as easy are those that you've heard about. Jennifer, who is Denise's sister, describing how Denise would stop by Jennifer's house 2 or 3 times a week just to visit, oftentimes bringing a Dairy Queen treat to share, always bringing a big platter of cookies to family gatherings. Sometimes they would just hop in a car, turn the music up loud, and just drive around. Sue, another one of Denise's sisters, describing how Denise would call her every day, sometimes 4 times a day. Sue and her brother having to go to their father's home and tell him that Denise had been murdered. James's mother, Lynn, learning that she had lost a son. Mike and Kelly learning that they had lost their brother. You've heard the description of James, hard worker, long hours because he wanted to be able to give Jayme anything she wanted, something that anyone who has been a parent understands. Everything he did was for his wife and daughter. James and Denise will never again experience the joy of seeing their daughter, who they loved ahead of anything else. Simple pleasures, like spending time at the lake with Jayme on a summer day, those are gone. Denise ever getting to hug Jayme again, it's gone. Beaming as proud parents when Jayme graduates from her upcoming 8th grade graduation is gone. These are things that James and Denise worked so hard to be able to share with Jayme. For Jayme, she was a room away from her father when he was brutally murdered by the defendant, and feet away from her mother when she was brutally murdered by the defendant. The first thing the defendant said to Jayme after he dragged her out to his car was to be quiet, don't move, or he would kill her. For the next 88 days, Jayme's life was sheer hell. And at 13 years old, she had to endure the trauma of not knowing from one day to the next if he would discipline or kill her. And what of the trauma of seeing both of her parents murdered? Jayme couldn't even attend her parents' funeral. Nothing Mr. Patterson says or does can mitigate the trauma he inflicted on a 13-year-old girl by murdering her parents and then kidnapping Jayme for 88 days. Nothing Mr. Patterson says or does can mitigate the trauma he inflicted on the families of James and Denise. Jayme should not have to spend 1 second of the rest of her life having to worry about the defendant being free. Nor should the families of James and Denise have to spend 1 second of the rest of their lives having to worry about the defendant being free and what could happen to them. Nor should the public have to worry about what Mr. Patterson is capable of doing if he is ever released from prison. Mr. Patterson has forfeited the privilege of ever again living in the community. The state respectfully submits that it would unduly depreciate the seriousness of Mr. Patterson's crimes to sentence him to anything less than the maximum sentence this court can impose, with no eligibility for extended supervision on counts 1 and 2, and the maximum sentence on count 3. All counts to run consecutively to each other. That's all.